This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Moving forward, as we're recording our podcast, man, we are down to the final four of the illustrious 2023-24 NBA season. And while there are still 4 teams remaining, there were 4 teams that we must once again put on the white jackets and thoroughly body them. May they rest in peace. Our coveted Autopsy report series continues forward. And as always, man, let me go and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Canoe PNC, my man, Mr. Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, brother?
Good to be back, man. Back in the saddle, as you alluded to. 4 teams gone, 4 teams still playing, kicking and screaming here in the Eastern and Western Conference, respectively, in the middle of those series as we record. But we got to pay our respect, as you alluded to, our homage to the dead, the forgotten of the 4 teams from the semifinals.
And I think the one way that you can kind of sum this up is that it's the parody of death. You have the reigning defending champions who have suffered an untimely demise. You have the team who many didn't feel with confidence was the best team out of the Western Conference, who suffered an untimely demise. You have a team that a lot of people felt, if fully healthy, are arguably as equal to, if not, the Boston Celtics out of the East, and their untimely demise. And you have a team which, by all accounts, man, I don't know if it just stays with, a team that Donovan rolls with. It's like no one buys into whether or not the team is actually legit. And we'll talk more about this Cavs team, which, now has become, the Utah Jazz of the Eastern Conference and stuff like that. So it's just parody with the way that we're going to have to autopsy these 4 teams respectively, Shaw, with the Nuggets, Thunder, Knicks, and Cavs. And I think that's what, to me, makes it ironic. Like, we can sit here and go into all of the details about, the teams remaining and why they, arguably are the best teams remaining, you know what I'm saying, given what they've done. But, these 4 teams, there were nothing to sniff at given their body of work through the course of the regular season. And it just didn't come together for them when it needed to, when it mattered the most, so to speak, which was, in the semifinals.
The only team that I'm legitimately surprised this year is Denver. Just because of their championship pedigree and the way they came back in the series, would have thought they might have had it, especially with the Game 7 on their home floor. And I think the second team closest to that would be the Knicks, by virtue of what they were playing throughout the playoffs. But they just ran out of bodies, which we'll talk about when we get to them, more in depthly. But that's my quick assessment of it. The OKC situation, you figure first year really in, and experiencing this to get to the second round is nothing to be embarrassed about in any capacity, and losing to a Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving led team. Nothing wrong there. Sure, they wish they could have did more, but again, I think there's nothing to hold their head down about. And then I think in the case of the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's interesting, analogy with the Utah because of the Donovan Mitchell led aspect of that. And Donovan Mitchell even being Cleveland, coming into the summer, going into next season, we don't know, but more to come on that Cavs team as news has broken since we decided to do our autopsy report about Cleveland specifically. So we'll kind of save that for the last part of our show here because it's a little bit juicy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lead, the show's Twitter handle, NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. Go to www.thebaselinenba.com to check out not just this episode, but all of our previous episodes. And if you're watching us on the YouTube channel and you see the blue and white logo, we say hello to you through the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group be running these content streets. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only check us out, but also check out the family of great content creators that we have riding with the 19 Media Group fam, whether it's music, sports, entertainment, culture, you name it, 19 Media Group has got it. So as always, we encourage you to go to the website so you can check out all of the great stuff that is going on. With that being said, we are going to obviously get right into our coveted autopsy report. But before we do that, are you ready to elevate your fantasy sports experience. With Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money during the most thrilling time of the basketball season. Imagine turning a $10 entry into a whopping $1,000. And with the playoffs in full swing, there's no better time to get in on the action. But that's not all. Prize Picks is all about variety and excitement. Whether you're a fan of basketball, hockey, or even League of Legends, Prize Picks has you covered. You can mix and match your picks across sports, choosing stars like LeBron James, Caitlin Clark, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham, all in one entry. It's the ultimate fantasy sports playground. Shaw and I grew up playing baseball, so we love to mix a little variety in with our picks from America's pastime. And for those of you who love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Plus, with quick withdrawals or a numerous selection of players and stat types, it's no wonder Prize Picks is the go-to app for fantasy sports. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks apps today and use the promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right. Prize Picks will match your deposit and give you more to play with. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. So let's get those entries in and watch the winnings roll. It's that easy. Don't forget to use promo code CLNS to get your deposit match. And stay tuned for more basketball insights right here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Let's play and win together with Prize Picks. And for those of you on the YouTube channel, you'll see that we have the promo code listed down in the right-hand corner. Say at any time during the show, we ask you, feel free to take advantage of all of the great sports happening, whether it's NHL, NBA, WNBA that's going on right now. All of it, Prize Picks is the way to go. More Baseline, Callie Warren Shaw, coveted Autopsy Report. Don't go away. Time now for our coveted Autopsy Report. First on the slab, we're going to talk about the no longer defending champions, because by the time that the NBA season is done, there will be a new NBA champion. So the one-time Denver Nuggets, who a lot of people thought that they were expected to repeat, given they may have lost a couple of ancillary pieces, but maybe they weren't so ancillary given, just the way that, they had to struggle just to get themselves in a position to probably win the series. But it's amazing to me, Shaw, because as much as we put this on the fact that a lot of people think that it's because of the core players, I think it's more so of the step down from the starters. And it's not Jokic. I think Jamal Murray may get a pass because he has never been 100% going into the playoffs. But when you look at KCP, you look at Aaron Gordon, and you look at Michael Porter Jr., which I know there's going to be a focal point in our conversation with these guys. I think you hone in on that and you say to yourself, the inconsistencies of getting that type of dominant play that they showed last year in the playoffs kind of reared its ugly head when they played against a really good, consistently defensive-minded basketball team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, who up and down the roster all displayed something and exposed some kind of weakness, that unfortunately Mike Malone just couldn't surpass um, X's and O's out of. It just kind of, and there weren't enough Jokic's on the basketball court for him to utilize for them to get past, this Timberwolves team to probably participate in this year's Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, the depth seemed to really be an issue, for them. And much was made about the Minnesota Timberwolves specifically being built, constructed to beat the Denver Nuggets, and the way Tim Connelly assessed that former Nuggets team as a former president and general manager over there, now moving over to Minnesota. And again, what a difference a year makes from the Rudy Gobert trade, right? But the way Minnesota came in there and stole that game from Denver is really an interesting, I think, lesson in terms of being the hunted and the hunter, if you will. And I think that was, the Jamal Murray pseudo cop out, if you will. Minnesota was just better, and ultimately Denver, in some ways, I think took for granted the importance of bench depth. You would think they still had enough, and I think we all thought they would probably still have enough, but ultimately they came up short. And Jokic and Jamal Murray and Michael, they were gassed. That Timberwolves team, like they ran them out of gas. By the time Game 7 came, it took so much for Denver to come back into that series after falling down 0-2 and credit the championship grip to actually take control of the series, winning 3 straight games, but then ultimately not being able to close it out. And hence now a new champion in the NBA for the 6th straight year, which is almost unprecedented. for the dynasties that we've seen in the NBA for such a long time. I think Denver will be back. I know this is obviously still a really good basketball team, but what can they do now, in essence, to improve the depth that they will clearly need? And I don't know that it's so much of taking the ball out of Jokic's hands, but I think it's taking the pressure out of Jokic to do so much every single night, especially when the playoffs come to town. Hey, he delivered, but I think it was kind of tough to watch him not shoot over 50%, which we're very much used to him doing that. And Jamal Murray being hobbled yet again. They need some more depth behind Murray that's electric in a way that can take some pressure off of the offensive load that the bench doesn't seem to have right now.
You bring up so many different points. I'm going to start a little controversy, Shaw. Okay.
Let's go.
Do you remember how I talked about one of the things that concerned me about the beginning of that series between the Timberwolves and the Nuggets? And I think I saw some glimpses of it as well, too, in the series before against, the Los Angeles Lakers, that I think with Jokic, it comes so easy to be as talented and as good as he is. And I think a lot of his leadership is manifested in just the way that he goes out in the court and he just does his thing. And I think it makes it easy for Mike Malone to get away with the things that he says, because he knows that when it's all said and done, he has to ride the shoulders of Nikola Jokić. What really struck me, Shaw, was the lack of urgency that I just saw permeate through the rest of the team. In other words, when I see a determined Jamal Murray, right, you see it. And maybe the injuries really, hampered him, bothered him. It really kind of, took a hold mentally of how much work it was going to take for him to be able to exert against a team as talented as the Minnesota Timberwolves, given what his responsibilities are, especially in this type of offense, because it's really predicated on how him and Jokic feed off of each other, move off of each other. You can clearly see Jamal Murray was being suffocated everywhere he went. So Aaron Gordon, I just wasn't seeing that hunger. You see glimpses in the way that he played great, right? But I just didn't see it throughout the course of the series. And that, look, I'm not gonna say what I know I'm gonna get to the point about MPJ, but what I'm getting at, Shaw, with this first point is you're gonna have to find somebody who is going to help offset the demeanor of what a Jokic brings for the rest of the guys to understand the moment and to find another gear than leaning on what Jokic shows you and manifests in what he does. I think it just comes too easy. He can make it work for him, because you saw how the look on his face in that game 6, getting blown out by 45. You knew he was going to come in and you knew he was going to put on a damn good performance. But for everybody else, that switch doesn't come on right. And it looked like those guys are just like, damn, this may have been the best opportunity for us to actually get this done, because we don't have the legs, or we don't have that other gear, or they rested on their laurels knowing that they had home field advantage for game 7, and to still not find it within themselves to do what was necessary, I think spoke loudly about the disconnect, where guys understand not just collectively as a team what they need to do, but also more so about the dependency that they have on Jokic.
Well, I think in some ways the way I'm interpreting that is that the rest of the team may feel like, hey, that's our lead horse. He can kind of get us through all things, but you all have a proverbial part to play. And when you run up against a team like Minnesota, and there's obviously not too many teams like Minnesota, but a hungry team like they were, it's going to require you digging down and figuring out another way to take some of that pressure off. And what it was in that game 7, right? They scored like 80 or 70 something points of like the 90 something points they scored or whatever, between he and Murray. That's problematic. The other thing it's interesting because it doesn't get talked about a lot from the Denver side, because they shoot a decent percentage from 3. I think they were 10th overall in the regular season, but that dropped down. They shot 37% from 3 in the regular season, down to 31%, in the playoffs. So the 3 ball wasn't falling, and Michael Porter Jr. had a very good first series with the Lakers, average or to below average one against the Timberwolves. KCP also, didn't shoot the ball well in this series, and then you add that to an ailing Jamal Murray, And it's a recipe for disaster, especially when you need to score points against a staunch defense like Minnesota. And that's something I think they need to address. A couple of other quick points, because when it goes back to the bench, Christian Brown, he wasn't even looking at the rim. He was like, nah, bro. I think there's a lot of people who like this young man and feel like he's got a great future and he could be a good role player, but he's got to at least look at the rim and then eventually has to be able to stretch the floor. I think at some point, I think he's more of a garbage guy at this point, or kind of slashing and driving to the basket.
You say he's a garbage guy?
I mean, around the rim, putbacks and back cut dunks and those types of situations.
He's supposed to be an energy bunny, right? Like, I mean, he's supposed to come in and give you like energy, hustle, and even that he was relegated or stymied,
when you think about their bench, who's the first person you think of? And some people might say Reggie Jackson, some might say Brown, or whatever the case may be. Peyton Watson didn't really get a whole lot of minutes in this, but he's still more of a defender at this stage. My point in saying all that is
Justin Holiday got more run.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's really the answer, but at the end of the day, they need to figure out a way to get more offensive punch off that bench and more consistent three-point shooting, whatever that looks like in the future. And it's interesting because I don't think Bruce Brown and Jeff Green were, three-point specialists in any capacity, but they provided other intangibles that got Denver over the hump in some other ways last year.
Yeah, so look, this to me is the bottom line of why now I want to focus my attention on Michael Porter Jr. for a second or a minute. Michael Porter Jr. to me is the greatest anomaly right now in sports basketball in the NBA. I don't understand how a guy with his skill set, his height, length, and advantage can't figure out a way to elevate his game to a point where I have to question whether or not, and you remember, Shaw, I was kind of doing this even last year on whether or not the combination of him, Murray, and Jokić is considered the three, right? Like the trifecta of the team, or it's really Gordon. And this performance again, this inconsistency again, rears its ugly head. And part of it is, it just seems like Porter's purpose right now is to shoot the three. It's like he has totally forgotten that his length could have caused mismatch problems in the paint, especially if Jokić is getting the ball. It's like I didn't see Porter cut. I didn't see him do anything relegated to the basket more than just the fact that he's just flanking out and just jacking up shots. And to me, that's the part that just disturbs me more than anything, because that's exactly what the Nuggets needed. They didn't need more three-pointers. They didn't need more three-point shooting. They needed someone to get to the cup. They needed to get to the free throw line. And it shouldn't have only been Jokić and Murray, right? And especially with Gordon, who doesn't shoot a high percentage from the free throw line anyway, this would have been a great opportunity to really display your versatility by getting to the basket. And I don't know how many times it was so bad that even the Minnesota Timberwolves were confident putting a smaller guy on Porter because they know he's just going to sit out there and flank around the three-point line. And if you're Mike Malone, I don't know what you got to do in order to get this guy to, I understand he had a whole lot of stuff that's going on, especially off the court or whatever. But this to me is indicative of the lack of maturation in Michael Porter Jr. that I think a lot of people were talking about when he got drafted. Like, this is why they said it's a project, because you should be able to see this from a mile away. You knew that the Timberwolves were going to put you in that position. And the fact that you didn't even attempt, you didn't even try in one of the most important situations, which was the last two games of that series, just speaks about whether or not he really fits in this system. And I think that you have to question that moving forward, Shaw. More than anything else, you can get all the role players you want, but if you got a guy eating up minutes because you assume that he should be gelling with the rest of your core guys, he's got to figure out a way to score points other than just jacking up shots, because you can see when his shot failed him, he completely dissipated and disappeared for the Nuggets throughout most of those games. And those are wasted minutes.
Yeah, I mean, 10-6, after, almost 20 points or 20 something points per game in the Lakers series, it says a lot. Again, you still got to credit Minnesota's defense here, right? I think I'm
not discrediting it, but what I'm saying is,
and so they had a game plan, but right. I think when you see that stuff needs to change, do you actually adjust, or do you continue to kind of do the same thing and just say, all right, well, this is what I'm supposed to be good at, even if it's not working over the course of a 7-game series. And I think, once you go down 0-2, I think you need to be obviously adjusting your play, and then, as the series continues to progress, like it really should be about anything to win. So I would agree. I'm disappointed in his inability, I think, to rise to the proverbial moment here, especially with Murray being, maybe not his normal self. And then it does bring into question, but I don't think Denver is asking themselves that question, honestly. They've committed a crap ton of money to Michael Porter Jr. over the next X amount of years, and this is a core, with that four of Gordon, Porter, obviously Jokić and Murray. I think those guys are pretty much locked in, and all the pieces around it are probably subject to some semblance of change, but they have a pretty high salary right now, and going to be scratching, getting into repeater syndrome here in a little bit. Don't know what they'll be able to do. You would figure playing with Jokić is, hey, should be everyone's dream, but how many other guys like Aaron Gordon are out there? Like, what roles can they really fill around what this team has and needs, and then pay somebody appropriately? I think guys are going to have to want to take less money, and now that they're not the defending champions anymore, that might be a little bit harder to come by than it was going into this past summer.
All right. So you stay, Malone and guys, they're going to figure this out with MPJ, and they're going to probably ride on the idea that they're really going to do some searching, to help bulk up and beef up that bench. I mean, listen, eventually something's going to have to give as well too, especially from the center position also, because you can't keep running Jokić out there like that. There's only going to be so much before you leave him susceptible to injuries and stuff. So I get that part of it, but ultimately too, the fact that you have to address, like, the other thing as well too, is it would be nice to see Jamal Murray get back to being more the 2 guard than just only the primary point guard. I think, to your point, that in and of itself was part of the intangibles of why Bruce Brown was so important, because he played a hybrid point guard play and was able to run him out there. I don't think you can continue to do that with Reggie Jackson, and clearly Malone didn't have the confidence enough to do that, to run Jackson out there, because you could have basically switched it up and had Jackson Murray on playing off the 2, but you can only do that for so long. So clearly they're going to probably have to upgrade that point guard position, whether it be via starter or via through somebody that you're going to come in is going to be the true 6th man coming off the bench to take up those minutes and move Jamal back over to the 2.
Yeah, well, player options for both KCP and Reggie Jackson next year. I would imagine both of those guys take set options, and so that puts Denver at roughly 190 million and change. So it's going to be tough. DeAndre Jordan comes off the books. Justin Holiday comes off the books. You can re-sign those guys at veteran minimums if you just need the bench depth. But I will be intrigued by the aspect of who they go after. As we said, the free agent class isn't amazing, but it's not amazing in terms of stars. They don't need stars. They need competency, if you will, and guys who are going to be able to stay on the floor. And I think they will be able to find that in this year's free agent class. But those guys will have to take a pay cut to play with the great Jokić and the Denver Nuggets.
All right. Well, let it be said, man. The Denver Nuggets got to do a little bit of soul searching, man, because the Minnesota Timberwolves snatched that right out their chest.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll talk about the number 1 seeded Oklahoma City Thunder and their demise. But was it really a demise, or was it just more so us kind of recognizing that, hey, they have arrived and we may have to take notice come next year just how damn good they can possibly be? You find out here on the other side. Don't go away. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, continuing our coveted autopsy report. And now we're going to focus our attention on Oklahoma City Thunder, the team that came out as the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. A lot of chirping from a lot of analysts who believe that the Oklahoma City Thunder weren't deserving to be a number 1 seeded team. Some have even said that they were the weakest number 1 seeded team in the Western Conference in NBA history, which, that's just fodder for clicks, in my opinion. But obviously, this team fell short of the expectations that as a number 1 seed, you should at least be in the Western Conference Finals. But listen, man, they played against a really, really difficult, Dallas Mavericks team that was on another level when it made its trades after the trade deadline. Clearly was not the same Dallas Mavericks team that we would have made our predictions off of. And I think because of that, it really had us taking a second look on whether or not this young team could overcome its circumstances, which is young and has never really been in that situation against, you know, one, an NBA champion, right? Uh, two, some guys who have already gotten quite a bit of playoff experience, and three, arguably, one of the more well-respected head coaches in the NBA, who is able to coach up and utilize a very well-rounded and dangerous Dallas Mavericks team. But let it not be said, y'all, this OKC Thunder team put the world on notice that this wasn't fake and that them getting that number one seed, mere bag of shells. Now it's a question of how many wins come next year can this team amass? And really, what room of improvement can it be done? Is it more of the roster or just more about these guys taking that next step, all of them elevating themselves to that next level?
I think there's some roster construction, not issues, but things they can tweak to be more competitive. The physicality seemed to be a little bit of an issue. So do they find some more size behind Chet, who's obviously slighter frame, playing that five position? And whether you think he's truly a four or whether he can man the middle, if you will, as a five man, is not even up for debate for me. The aspect is like he's still going to need somebody to take some pressure off of him in these years. OKC, what they did, a lot of people said they should have did more at the deadline, addressing that like specific need. Like, hey, you need more size, you need more rebounding, more physicality. And the Mavs, unbeknownst to us, went and got guys who were more physical in Gafford and PJ Washington to really bolster their lineup. But they thought, well, let's see how it goes. And I can't necessarily fault them for that. They make one small move and getting Gordon Hayward or whatever the case may be. That doesn't really pan out. Don't think he'll be back next year. And he's already complaining about the role that he had or didn't have, I guess, with this team. But to me, that's where OKC is going to try to focus on. And they still have draft equity. Remember, Sam Presti is the draft king in terms of being able to just hobble picks together and then actually doing something with them wherever he's picking, whether he's in the top five, whether he's in the lottery in the back half or the second round. He seems to be able to mine guys who are good basketball players. So that's why there's a lot of optimism for this team. And yeah, they felt like they should have moved on to the conference finals. Sure, some people said they were paper number one, seeds in the Western Conference, but this team is here to stay. SGA is a legitimate perennial MVP candidate. My guy, J-Dub, that's one of my dudes. And we're also hearing, as we're recording today, that Josh Giddey might be on the move. So, they have, and Giddey is not a bad basketball player. He obviously has some off the court issues as well, and then seemed to be maybe a little bit unplayable because of his lack of shooting. But there's teams who will take a chance, would be willing to, pick him up and maybe even give something for OKC to continue bolstering the rest of their lineup. So all is really rosy in OKC despite a disappointing loss in 6 games to Dallas.
I guarantee you the Denver Nuggets would have loved to have had Josh Giddey on their roster, right? All great points. The one thing that I disagree with people's perception about what the Oklahoma City Thunder, having to do something at the trade deadline is, look at where the Oklahoma City Thunder was at the time of the trade deadline to what they had gotten themselves or positioned themselves to do. The question wasn't about whether or not this Oklahoma City Thunder team was competing against the Dallas Mavericks. By all accounts, while the Dallas Mavericks made some really solid moves, Dallas Mavericks were in a, quandary themselves. They had to make sure that they played themselves out of the play-in situation, right? So it wasn't like, those particular pieces were just going to suddenly catapult them to the top seeded. The Oklahoma City Thunder had been hanging around the top three primarily for most of this season. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until the Denver Nuggets made a surge, right? It was really the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves jockeying for that number one seed. Okay. And all of them had little hiccups here and there through the course of the year. So if I'm Presti, if I'm diagonal, I'm saying to myself, look at how my guys are growing through the season. Look at how they're elevating through the season. You go in and you try to just get some guy and you're going to assume, get a guy that's going to come in and be a sudden rebounder. You want Chet Holmgren getting those minutes. You want to see, can he match himself up against the bigger front courts that are out there, right? So they knew this going in. If you go and you start throwing out capital, not to say that you don't have confidence in them getting it, but it's the wrong fit, right? then you put yourself in a position where you're now hampered with a guy that you don't know if you're going to be able to get rid of him. You can't offload the contract. And then now you got to figure out, you got to put something more on Dagnall's plate to figure out how to use him for the upcoming season. Doesn't make any sense. I understand why they went and they got Gordon, because even we said it's a pretty good move by them. Nothing splashy, but well needed and necessary for what they were lacking at the time. Okay. Now we fast forward and we see how teams, based on the moves that they have made, what that meant. I would challenge you to say, Shaw, while the idea is to get a big, my thing is get you some physicality from the front court side of it. Doesn't necessarily have to be a center, could have been a wing player. You know what I'm saying? Because it's obvious that the Mavs were able to use their bigs in a way that just as undersized. Lively is just as undersized as Holmgren, but he played much more physical and much stronger because he understood what was required for this Mavs team, given the type of players he had around them. So all I'm saying is that I think this comes down to what's the next step for J-Dub, for Isaiah Joe, for Lou Dort, for, each of these guys are all going to take another step forward in what made them so great for this season. And will it equate to the level of greatness that we're seeing from the remaining teams now, which is the Mavs and the Timberwolves in kind, that they're going to be able to match up with them? And then when you tell me Holmgren can't hang with these dudes, Holmgren can't, all right, now you got to really look at how do you offset that in order to balance out what the roster is giving you in order to make them as effective as they are. It's a tricky situation. We've seen where the Thunder have attempted to do things like this, and they failed miserably at it. So I like the idea that they held pat, because now this comes down to our guys are going to take that next step. And if they take that next step, you're just filling down the roster to be as deep and as dangerous as ever.
Yeah, I mean, real talk. And if they were to move off of Giddey, that frees up another $8 million, but they're already well below. They're only $102 million. Like all the teams we've talked about, no team this deep that got this deep into the playoff has a salary that low, because they have all pretty much young players commanding that ship. Obviously, SJ is on his second deal here, so he's in the $30 to $40 million range now. But everybody else is 10 million or under. Like that is wild, and then it's an amazing place to be from an organizational structure. So it backs up everything you just said. It's like, listen, why they had the money that they could have thrown to kind of maybe do something wild if they wanted to, but does that upset the team chemistry? Why not play it out? See how this team does. Let them not only take their lumps, but learn and experience, and then see where you need to adjust. And now it allows them to be major players. And again, not necessarily from the free agent side, but in the trade market if they want to, because Presti's done such a great job in acquiring draft capital. They could move a guy like Giddey if they so wanted to. They could move a guy like Dort if they were so inclined. I don't think they would, but I think those are the pieces that are available to them. And then I think if I'm not mistaken, Isaiah Joe has a team option. I don't think they picked it up. If they didn't, I can see Presti doing the right thing here in declining the option with the wink agreement. Like, hey, Joe, we need to pay you more than like $2.7 million. Like, you're valuable to us. So go ahead and opt out of that, or we'll decline that option. And then he can re-sign for something that's more in the, the $12 to $14 million range as well, too. Because remember, there's also a salary floor OKC needs to be at going into the start of next season. So there's a lot of machinations that are happening here with the Thunder. But to me, all of it is good. Holmgren really will be in essentially his second year playing, third year in the league next year. So all the things that he learned from this playoff run, he'll be able to take into. So health provided, this is a team that should be in the thick of the Western Conference conversation for a very long time.
And the one last point, Shaw, before we transition, the conversation, to the next team that we're going to autopsy. What we also saw as well too is a young team that didn't understand where they needed to be as good as they got, right? Like it just finally kind of came out. It just kind of just showed itself, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why everybody is making this big deal. If you really think about it, outside of the Denver Nuggets, Shaw, nobody has truly dominated the Western Conference. So when people keep talking about, they weren't deserving to be the number one seeded team, I'm sorry. I argue, when was there ever, outside of the Denver Nuggets, a true dominant number one seed. That's the whole point. This is why everyone kept saying the Western Conference is the most challenging. It is a gauntlet from 1 to 10. And the Oklahoma City Thunder won the games that they need to win to best position themselves to make as deep a run with the type of roster that they had to get to the semifinals.
Yeah.
I do not fall. You know what I'm saying? You talk about playing the game. They played the game not just intelligently, they played it smartly. And they even realized that they probably could have been playing in the Western Conference Finals. A few, ball bounces their way a couple of times here and there. They probably are going to be representing the Western Conference finalists other than the Dallas Mavericks. You know what I'm saying? And let's not forget the Dallas Mavericks were in this position with Luka Jokić a few years ago back in 2019. So it isn't as like, again, I just want people to truly understand that when we're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder and what they've shown us that they can easily be a legit number one seeded team. No different than you could have easily put the Timberwolves. No different than you could have put the Denver Nuggets. No different than you could have put the Dallas Mavericks. If this Dallas Mavericks team that people are watching right now was at the beginning of the season, they probably would have as many wins as the other three teams that were there and not be a 4-5 seed, a 5-seeded team. You know what I'm saying? So, again, people need to slow their roll and with the disrespect about what you saw from this team, because they showed you how dangerous and versatile they are. And Presti still got pieces to play with before he actually has what is now being dubbed as probably a dynastic run for the Oklahoma City Thunder team of successful winning seasons, which was something that you couldn't count going all the way back to when it was the big three with Durant, Harden, and Westbrook.
Yeah. Thunder still have clips in the chopper. And it's about to be unleashed. So this is going to be their league. There's not a younger team in the NBA, and there's not a team I think I'd rather be moving forward than OKC right now, especially with that cost control that they have over two of their main pieces, especially with J-Dub and Chet Holmgren. Amazing job by Presti in that organization.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warnshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to focus our attention on the New York Knicks team that was hampered so much by injuries, but damn, were they ever so close from putting themselves back into the Eastern Conference Finals, something that they haven't done in over a decade. You'll hear more about that on the other side. Don't go away. We're back. Callie Warnshaw, Baseline NBA podcast, continuing our autopsy report. Now we'll focus our attention on the New York Knicks. And look, what more can be said, man? This team, you talk about going all out, like throwing it all in, this team, and it's ironic because I think while a lot of people want to hate on the New York Knicks because of the New York Knicks fan base and the way that they kind of operate at times, you can't help but feel like, damn, you feel bad for the fan base and you feel bad for the players, to fall short and to not be able to kind of see themselves in this Cinderella situation, so to speak, Shaw, I think speaks a lot more to like, man, don't we wish that this script was rewritten just a little bit for us to properly assess whether or not this was hyperbole or this is the truth about what the Knicks showed us and the way that they played, not just through the course of the season, but all the way leading up to that Game 7 against the Indiana Pacers. I mean, there is a lot to cheer about. Me personally, I am so ecstatic for this Knicks team just simply because the organization finally got it right with the way that they constructed this roster. And I hope that they take this, they bottle it up, they leave it on their desk, right? Walk away from it for a couple weeks, whatever, come back after draft and whatever, and look at that bottle again. And before you open that nonsense up, you clear out everybody that's going to be talking some craziness about, got to go big, free agency, this, that, and the third. Keep your eye on the prize. That is what I'm hoping for this New York Knicks organization and team.
Well, before we get into the basketball side of it, I'm going to say something that's a little tongue-in-cheek here. While I agree with you, I don't think they need to go, big game hunting into whatever free agent or player says they're unhappy and becomes available. What I think they ultimately need to do, and I'm not disparaging their current staff here now, but they need to, as long as Thibs is the coach, they need to invest in an elite level training staff and an elite level recovery team. And I say that with the utmost respect, because I think at this point it's foolish to combat what Thibs is going to do. Like he's going Thibodeau was going to Thibodeau, and at this stage we understand that. So I think if this is who you've hitched your wagon to as a lead coach, understanding that players are going to play heavy minutes, you might as well invest in the supplemental and auxiliary staff that help those players when it comes to recovery and injury management to some degree. So I would have loved to see this Knicks team healthy. And there's a lot, because we won't know, that said, hey, this team could have made a finals run, and they could have. They very well could have, had everybody been there. But with Randall being lost for a large chunk of the year, and Anunoby being in and out after his acquisition from Toronto, it just was too much to overcome. Even Bogdanovich going down, the Mitchell Robinson going down, Hartenstein missed parts of the regular season as well too. I think with the Achilles situation, it was a rough year. When it comes to battling injuries, but the heart that this team showed is something that is really great for the NBA and great for the hustlers in the league, if you will. Like, not everybody is going to be elite. Well, when we talk about elite guys, you better mention Mr. Jalen Brunson. Whatever the hell Becky Hammond had to say about him not being a guy, whatever people said about him signing the contract, I wouldn't pay Jalen Brunson $25 million or whatever it was. He's all that and then some. And so the Knicks have a deal.
Didn't we say
on their hands, with that guy on that
Didn't
roster.
we say this though? Didn't we say this, right? And I said, the way I described this was, if the Knicks don't do this right, they will do more damage to the person that they're signing than they even imagine or realize. Because if the talk is still about Donovan Mitchell, if the talk is still about them missing again on signing who they were coveting and talking about, I mean, to the damn point where, like, even the NBA had to be like, are you guys tampering? Is that what's going on here? You know what I'm saying? I mean, are we tampering with this notion that he had to be, you know what I'm saying? We got to go after Donovan. But give credit, and this is what I'm saying, give credit to Jalen Brunson, because I wasn't sure what kind of mentality he was going to have coming into this situation. Let's not sugarcoat this, okay? And this is the reason why I'm saying New York Knicks fans are funny, right? They are hilarious. They didn't want Jalen Brunson in the beginning. They didn't want to be giving up this kind of money for him because they were so sour on the fact that the Knicks missed out on Donovan Mitchell. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now you love the guy. Now, oh my God. Hey, own it, okay? Own it. And at the same time, you can say thank you as well, too. You can say thank you, Jalen Brunson, because you showed us that our temperament needs to be better about our expectation for our star players, or players who are going to be stars for this jersey, right? He earned that. You know what I'm saying? And Knicks fans can never take that away, even if they're, they'll be, oh, he'll forever be a Knick and things of that nature. That's great. That's awesome. But guess what? You could have had that so many times over. You could have demanded that so many times over. And this roster could have been constructed exactly in that way. You had that with Julius Randle at times, right? You had that. And yet, and this is the reason why I'm saying people have to pay attention to what we're seeing here and why it's important that Tom Thibodeau stays as the coach, because of the fact that, to your point, Shaw, this is the give and take with him. And, he's going to run players down to the ground, but there is a hustle and respect factor that just was just never there prior to Tibbs. And no matter how many coaches you put out there, and this is why it made it impossible for Rose to get rid of Tibbs, because he can clearly see that with the right guys on that roster and they stay healthy, they can all practically be championship caliber. But to your point, Sean, you brought up such an excellent point at the beginning. This is where the organization needs to, quote unquote, recalibrate on where its investments really need to be in, right? It shouldn't be in the splash of the players that you bring. It should be on all of the other things to accommodate the intent that the run is real for these guys and that you want it to be everlasting. And it requires these guys to be fully healthy, fully on board, and fully disciplined in whatever regimen is required to maintain them being on the court for as long as possible.
Yeah, it really is. Like it sounds corny and cheesy, I guess, from us to say, but no, it's really the sports science of it now is because I think you have players that are bought into this system. These guys want to play these minutes, extended minutes, and give their effort and run through a wall, for their coach. You can't teach that. You literally cannot buy that. So now that you've cultivated it, how do you maintain it in a way that can be conducive to an extended run? Because they should have beat the Indiana Pacers. Like they should have and would have had they been able to stay healthy. And who knows what would have happened, because the Celtics are shaky. And so going up against that type of force and that type of energy and grit, that relentlessness might have ultimately, the Knicks could have fumbled their way, if you will, into the NBA Finals. And then once you're there, anything can happen. So I know there's a lot of optimism about this team. They have 2 draft picks in this year's draft, late in the first round. They can do some stuff with that if they want to, or bring it in for the proverbial depth. I'll be interested to see if they bring Bogdanovich back, or they decline. Not decline, he doesn't have an option, but he has a non-guaranteed deal. Brooks is up. So they can do some stuff on the edges there, but they got to obviously make sure their main horses are healthy. But one quick point before we move on, and the irony, and I don't know if it was brought up, in New York radio, because obviously I'm not there, but remember the Knicks should have drafted Tyrese Halliburton. And then obviously they wouldn't have Jalen Brunson right now. So I don't know which player most people would take, especially now or moving forward. I think it's close. I think the Knicks are happy where they're at. And I think Indiana's happy where they're at now as well, too. But by all intents and purposes, Tally should be a New York Knick anyway. So I know that was bittersweet for him, not bittersweet, but very sweet for him to beat that team, especially going down 0-2 and then coming back and beating them in the game 7.
Yeah, listen, we all said that, right? Remember, we had our pre-draft, we had our draft review, and we commentated on the fact that it's like, what the hell are the Knicks thinking, right? Like you needed a point guard. Tyrese Halliburton was available by all accounts. Everybody praises how quality a player Tyrese Halliburton was coming out of college. Some things may need to be polished. And listen, give credit where credit is due. The Indiana Pacers figured out a way. Rick Carlisle figured out a way to open this kid up. I don't know if something, was amiss when he was in Sacramento, whatever. But minus, the little, shade with him wearing that hoodie, I don't mind the brash talking and the bravado because he's going to come and he's going to bring it. You know what I'm saying? He's going to bring it. And I respect that. And I think because of that, it has renewed the rivalry of the Knicks and the Pacers. And I think now more than ever, we're going to see a much fiery, battle between these two teams. While everyone's focus and attention will still be about the Boston Celtics and things of that nature, I really think people need to pay attention to this Knicks Pacers situation as well, too, because they are on a collision course. And whether or not it's them as the 2 top teams in the Eastern Conference, or even if the Boston Celtics want to upset the apple cart and make sure that they hold ground and tell people, hey, we still run things in the East. Either way, both of these teams bring very different styles to their fight. And I think that in and of itself is the reason why the Eastern Conference is very quickly becoming one of the more watchable of the 2 conferences, so to speak, because of what Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson, and arguably what Tatum and Brown are doing respectively at their young ages in the primes of their career.
Well, it's not as destitute as I think some would think. I think most people would still agree the West is deeper and just better overall. But I'd say the East is not as far behind as people would say because of this young talent. And even if you don't like the aesthetics of the play, you have to respect the hustle of the play, the relentlessness of both of these teams that I think are going to have a lot to say. The uninvited guests into the conference finals are the Pacers, but the Knicks are going to have a lot to say about this, especially if they can stay healthy going into next season.
Oh, yeah, I love it, man. Oh, yeah, and by the way, the Miami Heat are still around in some way, shape, or form, right? You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw. Coming up, got to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, man, the news that just hit while we're recording this podcast. Got to give it up to the Cavs, man. They're making themselves. They're playing up into the storyline so well. You got to love it. More baseline. Don't go away. We are back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Last team we're putting on the slab, the Cleveland Cavaliers. All right. So Cleveland Cavaliers got dismissed. And not only did the team get dismissed, the team itself also decided to put a little extra work on our plate. So we just can't body the team. We got to body the coach with the team as well, too. So, of course, the Cleveland Cavaliers decide to part ways with JB Bickerstaff. I don't know. You surprised by this?
Not surprised, because it was looming literally seconds after they lost Game 5 in the semifinals. Sham had tweets ready, locked and loaded, as like this wasn't even this was some semblance of an inside job there. Players ready, just telling the whole story about Donovan Mitchell and his discontentment, and the JB lose the locker room and all this stuff. And at no time during the Cavaliers run here in the last 2 years, I look at that and say, yeah, JB is the problem. And all coaches have their issues and growing pains, but the roster was what the roster was. And a lot of people said, hey, they shouldn't have played the double bigs. And then they were saying, well, you can't play the two backcourt players together, and Donovan and Garland. And then you saw success when one or some of those guys were out, because it didn't allow for that duplicity in those same areas. That's not JB's fault. So, I mean, you can say, well, JB needed to put Jared Allen on the bench, maybe needed to put Mobley on the bench, or Garland on the bench, or Donovan Mitchell. Not going to happen. Like, when you have that level of talent, like you're trying to make it work. But it's an unfortunate situation. As we all know, coaches are always the first to go, whether it's really their fault or not. I think injuries did the Cleveland Cavaliers in, especially the tail part of this season. Mitchell was out, Karis LeVert was out, Jared Allen was out. Like, what were they really supposed to do? Against a team that was the best in the Eastern Conference, at least record-wise. So I think it's a little bit of a cop-out to let JB go, but somebody's got to fall. And if that means JB needed to go so that Donovan Mitchell could stay, well, then that would be the politics of star players in the NBA here. But that still remains to be seen. So I don't want to put that Donovan Mitchell's plate right now and say, okay, he's the reason JB is gone. But JB's not gone unless Donovan Mitchell okays it, I think, to some degree.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Kobe Altman is still the GM, right?
Yep.
And the hiring of JB Bickerstaff was on whose watch?
He hired JB. JB's been there 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So don't you find it kind of interesting, Shaw, that this was the call that had to be made by Kobe Altman? But when you look at the roster construction, there's no accountability for the moves that were made by Kobe Altman on his behalf to supplement the type of team that JB Bickerstaff has had to work with over the last couple of years. And you and I had said this. We questioned whether or not Donovan Mitchell was the right move. Because we were gobsmacked by the fact that it was the Cleveland Cavaliers that came in and swooped up and decided to take Donovan Mitchell, right? Because remember, they were still trying to figure out what they were going to do with Colin Sexton. Now, I'm not saying that they should have kept Sexton. I mean, look, if you're gonna tell me you legit, want to go for it, of course, you go after Donovan Mitchell, no doubt. But I probably would have told you, maybe not at the expense of keeping Darius Garland, because I didn't see where that combination worked more so than I probably saw Colin Sexton and Donovan Mitchell working. But all that being said, what did we say about Evan Mobley? What did we say about this dude, Shaw? He frustrates you the most because on any given night, that guy can probably look like freaking Victor Wembanyama, And then at nights, he looks like Michael Porter Jr. And that inconsistency.
Why Michael Porter got to catch a straight? What?
Is it a bad straight-o? Is it a bad straight? No, because what I'm basically saying when I'm talking about Evan Mobley is it's all there. He has the package. It ain't like it's just high. Like, what I'm saying? You got to drag it out. The problem is that it's not consistent. The problem is that it's not out there on a night in, night out basis. So that kind of stray is the same kind of stray we spent all that time talking about Michael Porter Jr. If that was the case, the Nuggets would still be playing in the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying he's the only reason, but I'm saying he's a big reason why. Hard for teams to make moves when you're vested on the potential of someone who should be giving this to you on a consistent basis, or it needs to happen in the most critical times, which is the freaking playoffs. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand Jared Allen wasn't there, but that's exactly why Evan Mobley should. This is his time. Is his time to shine. Now, did he play awful? No, but he definitely did not play. Like, I didn't see that same kind of performance. He did that kind of performance. Of, was it 33 points and some 12 boards? He did it on Al Horford, man. Come on. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't going to do that against Kristaps Porzingis. And Kristaps Porzingis is not the best defender, but he's definitely a step up for the Celtics. You know, Mobley wasn't doing that against Hauser and Cornette all throughout the series. So you know that was more him than it was about the Celtics also as well, too. You know what I'm saying? Like, what I'm saying is the way that this roster was constructed, Shaw, it's going to have its ebb and flows. And I don't know if you relied more on the fact that JB was supposed to pull, you know, magic out of a hat with this team. But you could clearly tell this team, the way that they were constructed, was not suited for what I think JB really wanted to do. And if you're Donovan Mitchell, I guess you'd be upset about that. But I think it speaks more to what is necessary for Donovan Mitchell. It's obvious that Donovan Mitchell wasn't who we thought he was when he was out there in Utah, and he was shouldering basically a team that was less talented than the team he had access to with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Because by all accounts, the Cleveland Cavaliers, talent-wise, looked a lot like what we're talking about with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I guarantee you we're talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder with more longevity than we'll be talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers.
So let me ask you this. I mean, what do you think ultimately happens here? And just, you know, I think as succinctly as you can, do they run this back with tweaks? Isaac Okoro is I guess is a free agent who they'll need to resign. I don't think he got a deal done, you know, by the deadline. Do they run this back and just say, hey, new coach, put in a new system and figure it out? And that could mean they bring some of those guys off the bench, if you will, so that there's not that duplicity in the starting lineup. Strus wasn't the total answer for them, but LeVert's on the contract, Mobley's on the contract, Allen's on the contract, Mitchell is on the contract. You know, it's his last year, so that's why there's like, oh, he's extension eligible, so blah, 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 blah. But do you just bring a new coach and say, cool, let's run it back? Or do you make changes with one Garland, one Mitchell, Jared Allen? Yeah, I don't think they're going to move Mobley, but, you know, one of those three guys.
You make changes, and honestly, well, let's put it like this. It all depends on the coach, right? This is what Kobe is hitching his wagon on, and obviously, Donovan Mitchell, I think, has gotten in the ear of the organization. Like, if you want to keep me, you're going to have to, the next person you're putting in here is going to have to be someone that I think is suitable, which now also usurps Darius Garland, right? So, and it, to me, the dynamics of this is very interesting, because if you flake out and get a coach that's better for Donovan but not better for Garland, what are we talking about here? You know, and how many coaches are out there that are really as innovative to accommodate the style of play that you both see from Donovan and from Garland? Listen, their styles are very different, Shaw. Garland, to me, is much better when he operates at a fast pace. Donovan is more deliberate. He acts like he plays fast, but he really does not play fast. He plays better half court, and I think he slow walks the ball a lot. His usage rate is way high. Taking the ball out of Darius Garland's hands, to me, I think goes against the rest of the roster, because the rest of those guys eat off of the way Garland facilitates and gets the ball. So I don't know what you do here with this.
Yeah, well, I do think Garland, even by some reports, you know, his agency, I think he's a LeBron guy, so clutch guy. If Mitchell stays, they've already said that Garland is going to be looking to peace out. So we'll see what ends up happening. And I
don't see Mitchell staying though either, Shaw. I really don't.
He's still on the contract, so they would have to find the deal to make that work. But I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
I just think that we're in this day and age, Shaw, where I think the enticement of the supermax and things of that nature, I think, is losing a lot of its teeth. Not because of not because what is it that I'm thinking of? It's not because of per se the team as much as it is the environment of the team. You know what I mean? I think a lot of that now is being factored so heavily that a guy like Donovan Mitchell might be the first dude to be like, yeah, you can offer it to me, but I'm just going to go elsewhere. You know, because listen, the circumstances by which he got there, I don't think made him feel like, I think he was happy he got out of Utah, but I don't know if whether or not he was ecstatic that it wound up being Cleveland. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think if you're Donovan Mitchell, you look at this is a prime situation with the talent that he had access to. I don't know, man. Do you go anywhere else if your intent is that you're really wanting to be competitive in any of the conferences? Who knows where you might land up, and you may not be the featured player by the time it's all said and done.
I agree there, and I know the old adages are the old teams are sniffing around again. So New York is not one of them in the situation, but here comes Miami, here come the Lakers. Hey, if Donovan Mitchell is available, then that's a whale that those two franchises will seek and go after. And maybe that will entice him. Maybe he does want to go somewhere. In Miami, he could be the lead guy offensively and maybe could complement Jimmy Butler, who takes his annual siesta anyway. So maybe that works itself out. But I think Cleveland is primed to retain him. He did not make an All-NBA team, if I'm remembering correctly. So his extension, he might need to play this one out anyway, and then see that he can get that extension at a higher amount later on. So Cleveland's in an interesting situation. JB is a guy who's been on our podcast, so we always have love for that. People showing us love, so we know he'll be back in the NBA in whatever capacity that he wants to, or a job in basketball and whatever he wants to do, sometime soon here. So shout out to JB, man, good individual. Just a bad situation there in Cleveland for him.
Yeah, he got a raw deal on this one. Unfortunately, you got a raw deal. It's one of those few situations where what do you do when you don't have your full pieces healthy, competing arguably in a gauntlet of what was going on in the Eastern Conference, and I say that respectfully because that's exactly what it was. You're playing against arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference, right? In that round, and you don't have your starters for you to really assess. Was it you? We always question too whether or not JB does make those type of adjustments, but I think there wasn't too many adjustments that could be made, man. It was a mano-a-mano circumstances situation, and the Celtics just have more mono than the Cavaliers, and I think part of that, to me, I think speaks more about the players and what they have to do to get themselves in a position to put the onus on being either coached up better or stepping up to just be better. Yeah. And I think because of this circumstance in this situation, Shaw, now the eyes are really on Donovan Mitchell, right? Now the eyes are really on Darius Garland. Are they paper superstars? Or are they going to legit be superstars? And I think, that's where we are with them.
Yes, sir. I think it's a great place for us to wrap, man. Love to hear what our fans and listeners have to say about it, how they feel, the Nuggets, Thunder, Knicks, and Cavs should go into the offseason. Which team would you most rather be moving forward? And this is a lot more to come. Did JB get a raw deal? We think so, but do you agree? So let us know here on the Baseline, NBA_Baseline, on Instagram, and NBA Baseline on X, now formerly Twitter.
Absolutely, man. Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw. We appreciate you guys. We do. We'll catch up with you next time.